Hello, hi, and welcome. If you are new here, my name is Sarah, and this is Wicked Reading. So today's video is probably so long. I have a list of over 100 books, 124 to possibly be exact. I might have miscounted, but I think that there's 124 books on this list that are additional recs. I use the term rec loosely because most of these books I have not read, but what I did was pretty much go through any horror bingo TBR boards I was tagged in, the comment sections of my horror bingo announcement and of my TBR, and took all of your guys' recs and TBR ideas to put into this very large, extensive ultimate list of books that fit the prompts of the horror bingo card. If you don't know what I'm talking about with the horror bingo card, I did create a horror bingo card reading challenge to go on for the next year between now and the end of September of 2025. I will link the announcement video down below and in the cards above. You really definitely should watch that. Otherwise, this video is going to be confusing and mean very little to you. But if you don't really care and you just want to hear about 124 books, hey, more power to ya. So this is a very extensive list, but of course still not an exhaustive list. I did create a highlight on my Instagram with more bingo card TBRs. So any TBRs that I'm being tagged in, I will add to that reel as we go forward with the challenge. So if you still want more ideas, check that out. And if I get tagged in any videos on YouTube for horror bingo TBRs, I started a playlist that I will attempt to link down below. So please check those out as well. So far, Lexi from Books with Lexi and Cassidy from Covers with Cassidy, those are two booktube creators that I love. They both actually already posted a horror bingo TBR. So go check out their videos because I did not include their books in this list. So go check out more if you want more ideas and more recs. This whole thing has opened my eyes to so many books, to so many authors I did not have on my radar, and I am so excited to check out some of these books. I'm honestly a little bit jealous that I didn't know about some of these books before I created my own TBR, but it is what it is. I'm still very excited to check out some of these books and have them on my radar now. So yeah, I'm gonna go through the whole board. My patrons decided that they wanted this in one single video. So again, I'm sure this is very long. Grab a drink, grab a snack. So I will not be including books for published in 2024 because again, you can check out any of my quarterly release new horror releases videos for references for that. I won't include cover pick because of course that is super subjective for people. I won't be including people's 5-star books, TBR vet, out of your comfort zone, or the book club picks, because again, those are all very, very subjective. But we will be going through all of the other prompts, and I tried to focus more on the hard mode versions of the prompts so people have more recs to go off that, but I did also still include a couple easy ones, and there are some that I'm not totally sure if they would or would not fit the hard mode version of them, but I wanted to include them on this list as well. So all of that being said, I'm going to try to go through these fast. I'm going to try to do a little bit of a speed run. I will not be going through full synopsises of these books. Most of them I will give at least like 1 or 2 sentences about them. Just gives you a little bit of an idea, and if that intrigues you, then you can look further into it. But I will be reading for my document, one, to save us time and to save me frustration, okay? So we're gonna start from the top row, work our way across and down and across, skipping the ones that I already mentioned I will not be going through. So we're gonna start off with The End Times Are Near, and for easy mode, we have Dead Sea by Brian Keene. This one looks super fun. So this one's actually a zombie apocalyptic book, so this could also work for the easy mode of Dead Man Walking, but this looks like a very gritty type of horror book that is described as being for fans of gore. Next up for The End Times Are Near easy mode, I have Suffer the Children by Craig DeLuey. I saw this on quite a few TBRs. This one could also work for Dead Man Walking easy mode. I do find a lot of apocalyptic books. If it's a zombie apocalyptic book, obviously it's also going to work for the zombie prompt or the reanimation prompt. So there is quite a few overlapping with The End Times Are Near and Dead Man Walking. But anyways, Suffer the Children by Craig DeLuey. This is about diseases that claims children who then come back needing to ingest human blood to survive. So this is actually more so like a vampire apocalyptic story. And the last one for easy mode is an alien apocalyptic book that somebody mentioned in one of my comment sections, and I actually own this book, so it totally slipped my mind. But that is All the Fiends of Hell by Adam Neville. I think that this also might be a little bit of a cosmic story as well. And for hard mode, there is Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin. This is a post-apocalyptic book following trans women and men on a grotesque journey of survival. Moving on to This is Halloween. So I pretty much only have hard mode ones picked for this because that one is quite a bit harder. So thank you everybody who gave very good recommendations and confirmed that these ones would work for hard mode. I can confirm that Dark Harvest by Norman Partridge does not work for hard mode because that was one of my TBR picks. I listened to it on audiobook. They don't mention trick-or-treating, so it does not work for hard mode. You could still listen to it for easy mode, of course. But for hard mode, we have All Hallows by Christopher Golden. This is actually described as a horror drama with 80s nostalgia, where odd children claim that the cunning man is coming for them. Next up is The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. So this is about a group of kids that learn about the origins and influences of Halloween when one is swept away by a dark something, and the boys must find him. This is also a young adult book, so be aware of that. Next, we have The October Boys by Adam Millard. This is also multiple timeline, so if it is multiple POV, it could also work for the multiple POV hard mode, but this definitely works for This is Halloween hard mode, and it takes place in 1988 when a group of boys are trick-or-treating when a creepy, rusty ice cream truck takes one of them. The book then jumps to 2016, where they are still haunted by the events and are drawn back to the place that it all happened. The next one is One Must Go by Alex Reed. This is available on KU, so if you have that, this would be accessible for you. And this is a paranormal story in which a god picks 3 middle school children each year for a deadly ritual. I'm not gonna lie, the synopsis says a lot more, and I was a little bit confused on what this story is, but somebody said that it mentions trick-or-treating, so it works for the prompt. Next up is a book that will come up for another prompt, and this is called The Wicked Unseen by Gigi Griffiths. This is also a YA book and would also work for the Satanic Panic hard mode. So this is about a new girl in town who is having trouble fitting into a community that believes there's a satanic cult conducting rituals in the woods. When her crush goes missing, she wonders what is really going on. Next up, we have Blood on the Cover. I only included a few of these because I feel like these are pretty easy to find. So for easy mode, somebody did have Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson on their board, and I honestly did not realize that there were blood spots on that book. So this is about a young woman living in rigid, puritanical society who discovers dark powers within herself. And for hard mode, I just have 2 additional ones to include. They're actually new releases for 2024. So that is Rest Stop by Nat Cassidy. This is a novella, so I'm not even going to say anything about what I think it's about. Just go into it if you want to. And then I did see on a few boards So Thirsty by Rachel Harrison, and this is a vampire story. So for the wood/wilderness prompt, a couple of easy mode ones are The Ritual by Adam Neville, if you want more of a folk horror in which we follow a group of guys that decide to go backpacking in the wilderness, and they get lost in the forest and they run into more than they bargained for. Also, somebody included The Troop by Nick Cutter. I don't know why I failed to mention this book for anything on this board because I love this book so much. It is one of the grossest books I've ever read though, but we follow a group of Boy Scouts that are on a scouting trip to get badges, and their trip shortly turns into a survival situation when they run into a man carrying a bioengineered nightmare. So then moving into hard mode, someone mentioned The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. This is technically more of a thriller, but if you're new to horror and kind of want to have a couple of softballs in there, you can go for this one. It is about a young woman who returns to her childhood camp to uncover the truth about a tragedy that happened there 15 years ago. Next up, we have Cunning Folk by Adam Neville. This is another folk horror. Adam Neville writes a lot of folk horror, and this is available on KU. And this is described as a strange and twisted tale of terrible neighbors and an ancient woodland behind the house. One that I found on somebody else's TBR board was The Lodge by Chris Koppel. I had not heard of this, but it says, unveiled the mystery of a hunting lodge in the remote hills of the Scottish Highlands during the Christmas holidays. The tagline of this book is when the hunters become the hunted. After that, we have The Broken Places by Blaine Daigle. This is about 3 lifelong friends who head out for a weekend trip to a secluded cabin, but there is something strange about these woods. The last one for hard mode I have for this spot is This Is Where We Talk Things Out by Caitlin Marcoux, I want to say. This is a horror of familial trauma, mother-daughter relationships, and what happens when we don't let go. This is also available on KU, and this is actually a book I've been interested in for a while that has been downloaded on my Kindle for a while now. So I definitely still want to read this. I will still use my book from my TBR video for this spot, but this is a really great one to pick as well. And this is another one that I think is a little bit more of a snowy setting. So coming into winter, it works really great if you're a seasonal reader. And moving on to classics, I only included a few retellings for easy mode. There's so many, but I just wanted to give a couple extras for people that might be still struggling with ideas for this. But for easy mode retellings, there is Ein Hollow by Tim McGregor. This is a retelling of Frankenstein. There's also What Moves the Dead by T. King Fisher, and this is a retelling of Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. And then we have The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is actually a YA retelling of Carrie that I did actually read and I did really enjoy. So this is like a true recommendation. Now for hard mode, I wanted to point out a few that are written before 1950. I'm not going to go over any of the synopsis for any of these, but for classic horrors, there's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dracula is one that's being picked a lot for this prompt. There is also Anything by Edgar Allan Poe, and another one that's being picked a lot is Carmilla. Moving down to translated. So, okay guys, the hard mode of translated work, where the hard mode is to include a translator's note. This one, I didn't realize how hard it was going to be. Of course, you still have the recommendation from my announcement video and then my TBR. Those are both really great options, but I did end up finding one more, and I tried to find more, and I was researching my little booty off, but I can only confirm one more so far for a hard mode translated work, and that is Walking Practice by Dolki Min. This is about a shape-shifting alien who finds themselves stranded on an unfamiliar planet and is disabled by Earth's gravity. To survive, they need to practice walking. This one I'm really interested in. The cover is wicked and wild and has me super intrigued. There are a lot for easy mode, and I did mention quite a few already in previous videos, but I wanted to include a few more that I've been seeing on a lot of other people's boards. The first one is The Vegetarian by Han King. This is about a woman who begins to get nightmares and renounces eating meat, which manifests in ever more extreme and frightening forms. One that I have actually read and I totally just failed to mention it was Tender as the Flesh by Augustina Best. And this book follows the aftermath of a widespread contamination of animal meat for consumption, and now the world must turn to new forms and ways to fulfill their meat-eating tendencies. A new release of 2024 was Wormwood by Leila Martinez. This is described as a class-conscious horror that drags generations of monsters into the sun. And then one that I actually didn't realize was a translated work is Fever Dream by Samantha Schreblin. So that would also be any of her other stories as well, but particularly Fever Dream I did see on somebody else's TBR, and this is about a young woman who lies dying in a rural hospital clinic. A boy named David sits beside her. She's not his mother, he's not her child. Together they tell a haunting story of broken souls, toxins, and the power of desperation of family. So that's like pretty much a riddle of a synopsis. Another one that will be coming out in 2025 actually by Augustina Batsturika is called The Unworthy, and this is a literary horror about a woman cloistered in a secretive, violent religious order while the outside world has fallen into chaos. This one I'm not sure because obviously it hasn't released yet. I'm assuming it's probably only going to work for easy mode just because her previous translated work did not include a translator's note, and it seems to be a bit of a pattern that people who include translator's notes tend to translate the same author's works. So I'm thinking it probably won't work for hard mode, but keep your eye out for it. Next, we're gonna go into Reaper Read. So I have 2 books for hard mode, and then I have a decent sized list of ones that I'm not sure if they would go into hard mode or not, but they would definitely at least go for easy mode, but I have them with a question mark because maybe they could also be hard mode, but I cannot confirm it because I haven't read any of these yet myself. But for confirmed hard mode, we have The Black Farm by Elias Witherow. So I'm honestly not sure if this technically counts for hard mode, but I'm telling you right now, you can count it. It's maybe a little bit of a stretch, but based on the synopsis, I'm allowing this to be counted for hard mode, even if somebody thinks it shouldn't be. I made the board. I'm telling you guys, you can use it. So it says, after the loss of a child, a couple decide to end their lives, but one wakes up and finds himself in a hellish world with twisted abominations. So I think it might be kind of like a purgatory type of story. And I don't know. I just feel like if they're in this purgatory / hell type of area, and if they're coming back after doing what they did, this atmosphere might be a manifestation of either their guilt or their own grief or whatever. I feel like the place itself is almost a manifestation of death. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but pretty much what I'm saying is counted for hard mode. Now, this is a splatterpunk book, okay? So be aware of that. So if you are new to horror, I do not recommend reading this one. I haven't read it personally. I actually don't really read very much splatterpunk. So if you want to count it also for out of your comfort zone, if you're like me and don't read very much, that would work. But this is probably not a horror beginner type of story. I wouldn't throw you into that. This seems like it's going to be very, very dark. There's quite a bit of triggering things just in the synopsis alone, so steer clear of this if you're new to horror, I would say. Another one I saw that a lot of people are including on their hard mode version of Reaper Read is The Bonesmith by Nikki Powell Petro. This is technically a dark YA fantasy, and it follows a disgraced ghost-fighting warrior who must journey into the haunted wasteland to rescue a kidnapped prince. Now, I will say, side note, for hard mode, I haven't read this book, so I cannot confirm nor deny 100% either way, but I do just want to make the general statement that for hard mode, your book must still fulfill easy mode. So I don't know the themes of this book. It doesn't necessarily scream grief or, you know, dealing with the loss of somebody or somehow having to deal with death. Other than it seems like we have a necromancer. And so I don't know really that this is a bit of a stretch from what I know. I haven't read the book, so I don't really know. But just as a general statement, the book still needs to fulfill easy mode and the standard prompt, and then the hard mode is added on top of that, if that makes sense. So just saying that, but people are using it. So just as a general statement, but again, do what you want. So anyways, moving on to my long list of books that I know definitely fulfill the standard prompt, but may or may not fulfill the hard mode version. So we have Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman. So this is described as a gothic punk graveyard tale about what haunts history and what haunts the human soul. And it says it touches on addiction, loss, and guilt. Another one I stumbled upon was A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen Peck. In this story, we have a main character that dies and wakes up in the afterlife. And it seems like this book kind of focuses on existential dread. So for me, this is kind of like grief of your own death, if that makes sense. So I would count that at least for easy mode, maybe also hard mode, but you'd have to read it to know. The next one is This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno. This is about a man who flees the city where his wife's murder became a political and media sensation, a surreal mediation of grief with a dash of weird cosmic horror. Next, we have Come With Me by Ronald Malfi. It says one man's search to find answers about his recently deceased wife's life while being haunted by her absence and her ghost. I also have Crossroads by Laurel Hightower. This is about a woman mourning the death of her son, and one day she discovers she might be able to see him again. Next, we have How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This is about two adult siblings who grapple with the sudden and tragic loss of their parents. And then lastly, I have Cold Snap by Lindy Ryan. I had not heard of this book, and actually the person that I saw with this book, they actually had it on a different prompt. So this is about a grieving mother and son who hope to survive Christmas in a remote cabin. It is a novella of dread, isolation, and sinister spirits lurking in the frozen woods. So in terms of the hard mode for this one, I do feel like there can be quite a bit overlapping between the hard mode of this and like Dead Man Walking with reanimation, as long as the reason something might be coming back or if there's a manifestation of something physical, as long as it's tied to their grief, and it's kind of like a symbolism of their grief being physically portrayed, then that counts. If you want to think a little bit more outside of the box, other than just like the Grim Reaper, death itself personified, that's kind of what I meant by some type of manifestation of said grief. It can get a little tricky going into that direction, but the book I picked out for this spot on my TBR very much emulates kind of what I mean by that. Moving on from there, we have the spooky word prompt. So I only included 2 books that work for hard mode. Again, I feel like this one is so easy to find, but I did see one that is actually a book that I really want to read, and it was a really good choice for this, and then that is Crypt of the Moon Spider by Nathan Balagrud. So this also might be like a genre bending book from what I've kind of gathered from the way people talk about it, but crypt and spider, honestly even moon would be a spooky word, so it actually has like 3 spooky words. And this is described as a dark and dreamy tale of horror, corruption, and identity spun into a stickiness of webs. So this could even be a creepy crawler contender. I don't know. I haven't read it yet. Can't confirm. But I did see it on a spooky word pick. Another one I already technically brought up is All the Fiends of Hell by Adam Neville. Fiends in Hell, I would count that for hard mode. Moving into Dead Man Walking, I only have 2 for easy mode. The rest are hard mode. So for easy mode, we have Maggie's Grave by David Sodergren. This book follows 4 young adults dealing with small town living when Maggie wakes up wanting revenge. This is like a campy 80s slasher type of book. And then we also have A Botanical Daughter by Noah Medlock, which also would count for easy mode of classic, because this is like a Frankenstein like inspired book. This is mostly like Frankenstein inspired, but I would count it. And this is a book that follows 2 men who create a daughter out of a corpse and plants. Again, I mentioned in my announcement video, but I feel like a lot of Frankenstein inspired stories would count for Dead Man Walking as well. So for hard mode, these are all books that are within series, and we have Voices in the Snow by Darcy Coates. I don't know how I didn't think to mention this book in my recommendation video, but this is about a woman, Claire, who wakes up aching and afraid in a stranger's gothic home who claims he saved her, but something hungry is waiting for her to step outside. Another one I read a while ago, and I actually didn't realize they came out with a sequel for it, is The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. This is also a movie, so it could count for as seen on the big screen as well. And for this one, you follow the story of a young girl who discovers the truth of who she is and the environment she's been raised in. One that somebody mentioned in the comment section was Rotten Ruin by Jonathan Mayberry. This is actually a YA zombie series, and it says, in a zombie-infested post-apocalyptic America, young teenagers must find a job by 15 or get their rations cut. In the story, we follow Benny, who reluctantly becomes an apprentice to a zombie hunter. So this one sounds like it'd be a little bit more of a fun, zany time. Next one is one that somebody asked about in the comments. They did technically ask about it for a different prompt, but I feel like this one could be used in this prompt. It's definitely a different way to interpret the prompt, but that is Jurassic Park and the series of Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. It is a little bit more sci-fi, but if you don't know about Jurassic Park, this is pretty much about scientists that genetically engineer dinosaurs back from extinction. Moving into genre blending, this is just a list of books that I would consider to be horror blends. Of course, for hard mode, it's subjective as to what you don't typically read, but I wanted to include a few more options and ideas. So somebody did have Chasing the Boogeyman by Richard Chismar on their list. So this is kind of like a crime thriller horror, and it is about a journey of a serial killer and the crimes committed against teenage girls in the 80s. Then we have House of Bone and Rain by Gambino Iglesias. This is another 2024 release, and this is another one that's kind of like a crime thriller horror. So we follow 5 teenage boys in Puerto Rico seeking revenge after one of their mothers is murdered by drug cartel. And this is also described to blur the boundaries between myth, mysticism, and the grim realities of our world. Another one is Lost in the Garden by Adam S. Leslie. This is also another 2024 release, and I believe that this also has some magical realism in there. And this is about a group of 3 girls who go away to the English countryside that turns out to be creepy, dreamlike, unsettling, and unforgettable. Next is another 2024 release actually, and this one was very popular when it came out, and it is called Someone You Can Build a Nest In by John Wiswell, and this is like a fantasy horror. They actually describe it as a horror fantasy. So like a horror romantasy. They describe it as delightfully cozy and funny about what it means to be human and to truly love someone. This seems like it might be a good segue into horror. I haven't read it myself. I honestly don't have any interest in it, but I've heard good things about it. Next is Leech by Hirian Ennis, I want to say. This is like a sci-fi gothic dystopian horror, and it is also post-apocalyptic, which I didn't realize. So again, you could use this for the end times are near prompt. So this is, again, a post-apocalyptic frozen world where a physician dies a horrible death, seemingly by his own hand. And it seems like this might have some parasitic elements, so potentially creepy crawly as well. I don't know. I'm very intrigued by this book. Next is pretty much anything by Julia Armfield, but I wanted to specifically highlight Our Wives Under the Sea. This is one that I did actually read and I did enjoy it. This is like a literary horror, and we follow two women who are separated for 6 months while one of the women is on a deep sea investigative mission, and the vessel gets lost under the sea, and it follows their story as they come back together and try to understand these new versions of one another. And then next, I don't know how I didn't think to recommend this on my announcement video, because this is so far my favorite book of 2024, and that is Tear by Erica McKean. This is another literary horror following a girl who finds herself locked in the basement after the doorknob to her room disappears. And the book proceeds to go in a very bizarre, heart-wrenching, and disorienting direction. It's quite a unique, very hard to describe type of story, but it is definitely a literary horror. It's very dreamlike with some wicked body horror in there as well. Also, for this, you can include historical horrors. So for that, I wrote down Our Hideous Progeny by C.E. McGill. This is also another one that would work for honoring the classics on easy mode, as it is inspired by Frankenstein. This story is described as a love letter to women in science with themes surrounding human capabilities, ethics, and what it means to truly cure, care for, and love. This also has a lot of paleontology talk in it, so maybe even more of a scientific historical horror. Moving on to BIPOC authors. So there are so many new authors I have discovered through seeing your guys' book picks for this, and I'm so excited to check some of these out. So one that I did already know, I actually own this book, it was on my radar, but I wanted to include Confessions by Kene Minato. This is a revenge plot surrounding a middle school teacher trying to figure out who may or may not have contributed to her daughter's death. Next up, we have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, or anything by her, but this was the book that I saw on someone's TBR. It says, after receiving a frantic letter from her newlywed cousin begging for someone to save her from a mysterious doom, the main character heads to the Mexican countryside in answer. This also might be an honoring the classics easy mode. This might be inspired by another classic story, but I don't really want to say what it is because that might be like a spoiler, but I think you might also be able to count this book for that spot, but I haven't read it yet, so I can't really confirm, but I think so. Next, we have You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Caron. This is a YA horror, and this is actually a summer horror that pays homage to the slasher genre, so it's a slasher. Next up, this one I really want to check out. It sounds super interesting to me. It's called Model Home by Rivers Solomon. This is about siblings dealing with the death of their parents in a new kind of haunted house novel. I really like the cover of this, and just a different spin on a haunted house story. I'm very intrigued by that, so I kind of really want to check that one out, so I'm glad I stumbled on that. Next is Do What Godmother Says by L.S. Stratton. This is also dual timeline, but I don't know if it's multi-POV. So if it's dual timeline but not multi-POV, it cannot be counted for multiple POV hard mode. But if it is dual timeline and multiple POV, it can also be counted for hard mode multiple POV. But this is about a modern day writer and a Harlem Renaissance artist who are connected by a painting with a deadly secret. So actually, as I'm reading that, I'm realizing it probably is also multiple POV. So as long as that's true, this could also count for that prompt. One I've been hearing a lot of really good reviews about lately is I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast is Me by Jasmine Shea. This is also maybe good for pink horror hard mode, but this book explores the competitive world of ballet dance, lifting the veil on the institutions that profit on exclusion and the toll of giving everything to a world that will never love you back. I have heard that this one has really good body horror, and I think it's a little bit supernatural as well, but I'm not sure on that one. Next up, we have Alexis Henderson in general, but I did see somebody include House of Hunger on their list, and this is a sapphic gothic horror following a blood maid who has spent her life in the slums. I do think this also has some blood specks on it, so if you want to use it for blood on the cover for easy mode, I think that this one should work for that too. Next up, we have Cryptid. So first up, we have Below by Laurel Hightower. This is about Mothman, and this is following a recently divorced woman who experiences bizarre electrical problems. I'm just going to leave it there because that's a very short book, so that's just kind of like the setup of the story. Next, we have Together We Rot by Skyla Arndt. I don't really want to tell you guys what cryptid creatures in this because I feel like it ruins a really fun aspect. So just know that it would count for cryptid, and honestly, if you're going into it without knowing what that creature is, just count it for hard mode because you don't know what the creature is going to be. So just count it for hard mode, even if once you realize what it is, you did know about that before. Just count it. So this is a YA book, but this book is about two estranged best friends who need to team up to confront an ancient evil in their neighboring woods. I did read this one and I really enjoyed this one, honestly. So I do personally recommend this one. Next, we have Devolution by Max Brooks. So this is a book surrounding Bigfoot, and it is the story of the Green Loop Massacre, which has passed unnoticed until journals from the bloody wreckage are recovered. So I think that this is formatted in a way that you're reading journal entries, so it does sound pretty interesting to me. Next, we have Stonefish by Scott R. Jones. This is, I guess, a Bigfoot one. This one seems super goofy, super odd and weird and strange. And I found this from Kelsey's TBR list. Kelsey from Slime and Slashers. She has some pretty zany, interesting books that she has picked out. I think that she might be doing a TBR video. I don't know, but definitely check out her video if she's making one and it comes out. I will have that in the playlist because she has some very interesting books picked out. But this follows a missing tech mogul, a jaded reporter, and a damaged AI as they return from a horrifying reality, and something is lurking in the woods. So it's this I would also count as like genre bending. I don't know what's going on with this one. It's like tech horror, cryptid horror, who knows what else, but it seems like a really fun time, especially based on the cover. Next, we have It Came from the Trees by Allie Russell. This is actually a middle grade book, but I've heard really great things about it recently, and it follows a young girl and her scout troop who are willing to brave the woods to find her missing friend. This is another Bigfoot story, and it comes as no surprise. I think you go in knowing that very fast. Next up, I have a few mermaid stories. So we have Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. So this is about a group of scientists who set out after footage of a previous lost voyage is uncovered, and it shows creatures attacking the previous people of the voyage, and it is of great debate whether it was a hoax or it was legit. And this is also a very science heavy story, so you can also count it for genre bending if scientific horror is not something you typically read. But I do also, side note, want to reiterate, because I don't feel like I personally made it clear, that with the cryptid creature one, for hard mode, it was more so you either didn't know about the creature at all, or you knew about the creature, but you didn't really know the lore. Also, that could count for books that are doing something new with the lore. Like if they're kind of creating a new lore surrounding a very well-known creature, that could count as well. So I don't feel like I explained that well to you guys, so that was on me. But yeah, just to clarify that. So moving on. Another one about mermaids, which isn't really horror. I'm sure that there's some horrific stuff in the story, but it seems a little bit maybe more historical. I'm not quite sure, honestly, what the vibes of this book are, but it is called The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This is actually a novella, and it says that the water-breathing descendants of African slave women tossed overboard have built their own underwater society and must reclaim the memories of their past. So again, this kind of feeds into what I just said about if the story is recreating a lore and kind of creating a new lore outside of the, I guess, like more mainstream story, that would count. And then there is an author called Luca T. Jacobs, and she just writes a lot about Dogman and Bigfoot, and her stuff is available on KU. I didn't see her on anybody's particular list, but I just came across her stuff as I was searching for other cryptid stories. And I don't know who Dogman is, and I don't know the lore of that, but I probably won't be checking out her stuff, but I just wanted to include another option for a different cryptid creature. Moving on to the number prompt. So the first one I have for easy mode is one that releases in 2025, and that is The Haunting of Room 904 by Erica T. Worth. This is more so described as a paranormal thriller, and it is a novel about a woman who uses her unique gift to learn the truth about her sister's death. Next up, we have The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. I saw a couple iterations of books that just have the word ones in them. This is about a woman who stumbles on a terrifyingly twisted world while cleaning out her deceased grandmother's home. I will also say, if you are new to horror, I feel like T. Kingfisher is a really good author to introduce people into horror because she tends to have some other aspects going on in the story. So that might be a really good one if you're just getting into it. I personally haven't read this one, so I don't really know, but just based on T. Kingfisher's other works, they might be a good one. And I have a couple for hard mode because yes, this hard mode is, I think, the hardest hard mode on this whole board. So I did run into a story on someone's board that would be perfect, and it's called 5 Stories High. So we have 5 and high, those both would count. And this is a short story collection. Well, not a short story collection. It's actually a collection of 5 novellas edited by Jonathan Oliver. And each novella is set in the same house, focusing on 5 different hauntings of this like building. I guess like not house, but like apartment building or something like that. So there's that one. I had a couple people mention 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This would count. And it is about a man who travels back in time to prevent the JFK assassination. It does sound a little bit more like historical fantasy-esque. I feel like anytime Stephen King writes a book, people immediately kind of put it under horror, but I do find that some of Stephen King's books aren't necessarily strictly horror, but you can still count it because this one's rough. Next up, we have Satanic Panic. So I have mostly books that I know will fit for hard mode for you guys. I have 2 that are kind of question marks that definitely work for easy mode, may or may not work for hard mode. So the first confirmed hard mode one we have is, again, The Wicked Unseen by G.G. Griffiths. I did already mention this one, but it was recommended by a commenter that this would work. And we also have Whisper Down the Lane by Clay McLeod Chapman. It says, in the 1980s, Sean's mother let him tell a lie about his teacher. 30 years later, now known as Richard, somebody confronts him about what happened. So honestly, the synopsis is a little bit confusing because we have name changes and stuff, so it was tough to dwindle it down to one sentence, but you may definitely want to read the rest of the synopsis if that one kind of intrigued you. Next up, we have My Ouija Boyfriend by David Irons. This is about a lonely girl who meets a supernatural friend while playing with a Ouija board. Another 2024 release, and that is Evil in Me by Brahm. This is about a woman who must get the world singing to save her possessed soul, and there is like a ring in the story, so that counts as the physical item. Next up is a book that I read, and I just want to reiterate, I didn't include it on my personal recommendations for a reason, but it does fit the prompt. So I'm not telling you that this is a good book or whatever, but I am saying it fits the prompt. And that is Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And this follows a sound editor and soap opera star as they stumble onto an occultist who made a strange film decades ago. And I believe that there's like a camera or film or something that is the physical item for this, so it would count for hard mode. Now for the books that I'm not totally sure fit hard mode, we have Last Days by Adam Neville. This book follows the story of a sadistic cult leader while a documentary crew follows. I have a feeling it probably doesn't include a physical item because it's more of a cult story and not necessarily a supernatural type of story. So I don't think it would, but if you don't need it to, then there's that option. Next, we have We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. This is about a family on the verge of self-destruction, finding themselves isolated and locked in their bathroom during a tornado warning. I actually read this and I don't remember if there's a physical item in there or not. It is a shorter book though, so it's not like a super big commitment if it doesn't have a physical item in it, but there is that one. Moving into pink horror. Honestly, for this one, I have more to give you guys for easy mode. I only have 2 for hard mode, but for easy mode, to include a few extra, we have What Kind of Mother by Clay McLeod Chapman. This is a visceral exploration of parental grief. So grief is mentioned, so it could also potentially be used for the Reaper read as well. We have Deliver Me by L. Nash. It says, after fleeing the Pentecostal church and dealing with multiple miscarriages, Dee Dee now works at a meat processing factory and is pregnant again and is determined to carry this trial to term. After that, we have Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison. I don't know how or why I forgot to mention this on my personal recommendation list, because I highly recommend this one. I love this story. That's my favorite Rachel Harrison book ever, and I feel like this is also a really, really good one if you're just getting into horror, because it is on the slightly cozier side. There's some dark themes in it, but it's not like super horrific, and it's so good. This follows our main character Rory after she returns home to help her pregnant twin sister, and she finds herself experiencing a transformation in touch with the animal inside of her. It is a werewolf story, and you know that immediately. Next up, as just like a general author recommendation, is Wendy Dalrymple. She writes a lot of pink horror, and I think most, if not all, of her works are available on KU, so I recommend checking her out. Moving on to hard mode, I have 2 options. The first one is Youth Juice by E.K. Sathu, I want to say. This is about a 29-year-old copywriter who realizes beauty is possible at a terrible cost. It is a surreal, satirical New York City it girl culture book. And this technically is not a debut. The author did technically write another book in a different name, but this is the debut book for this pen name, so I would count it. Next, we have Baby Teeth by Zoya Stage. I actually did read this one, and while I don't know if I recommend it necessarily, I had a really difficult time with this book because it triggered so much fight or flight in me. And it's a little bit more of a psychological, maybe suspense type of story, but it's like a real life horror at the same time. So this explores motherhood. This is Zoya Stage's debut novel, which I honestly didn't realize until I was trying to find another one for you guys. So the synopsis partially says, Hannah is a sweet but silent angel in the eyes of her adoring father, but her mother knows another side of her. Moving into multi-POV, I have one for easy mode, and that is We Are the Beast by Gigi Griffiths. Again, this author just became on my radar, and this sounds really good. I think that this is actually a 2025 release, if I'm not mistaken, but I think that this would also work for easy mode for pink horror and for blend as a historical horror, and this is also YA. So it says deaths and disappearances pile up as a mysterious beast stalks the French countryside and 2 girls seize an unlikely opportunity that might save them all or serve them up on a platter. Going into hard mode, so this would be books that both have multiple POV and also different timelines, whether that be dual timeline or more than that. But first we have Mr. Splitfoot by Samantha Hunt. I had not heard of this, not the book, not the author, and I'm very intrigued by this now. This follows 2 orphan siblings in a house full of abandoned children run by a religious fanatic when an aunt comes to collect them without speaking a word of where they are going. And it sounds very interesting. Next up we have Cuckoo, I'm pretty sure this would count, by Gretchen Felker Martin. So this follows a group of characters trying to survive a conversion camp, like a gay conversion camp, and then the book jumps ahead to them as adults. So that counts. Then we have They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. So this is technically a psychological thriller, and it is about a woman who gives bad men exactly what they deserve. Next up, we have The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. This is another one that's a little bit more suspense. I know Simone St. James, I've heard that a lot of her works, as well as Jennifer McMahon, a lot of those 2 women's works tend to have a lot of multi-POV and dual multi-timelines going on. But again, their works do land more so under suspense. But this one in particular follows a journalist who uncovers the dark secrets of an abandoned boarding school. So getting into the last row, we have As Seen on the Big Screen. I did already mention a few throughout the video, but to include a few more, there's Delicate Condition by Danielle Valentine. So this follows an actress who is convinced a sinister figure is going to great lengths to make sure her pregnancy never happens. American Horror Story actually created one of their seasons based around this, and it is also available on KU. I already did mention, but again, Cabin at the End of the World. That fits a lot of prompts on this board, honestly. Then we have The Ruins by Scott Smith, which I did mention in one of my videos, but I kind of forgot that they did make a movie based on this, so that is a possibility. Then we have I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This is about Jake and his girlfriend who go on a road trip together for her to meet his parents for the first time. Then we have Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. This is a book about a woman who believes she is turning into a dog, and there is a movie set to release next year for it, so there's that one too. Short stories, I didn't honestly put too many on this list, but for easy mode, we do have Mystery Lights by Lena Valencina. I actually recently bought this, so I just decided to throw it on this list for you guys to have some more options. This also was published in 2024. It says, from the all too real horror of a sexual predator on a college campus to a lost sister transformed by cave-dwelling creatures. This is a debut collection of stories about women and girls, so this also would work for pink horror hard mode, actually. Then for hard mode, we have Never Whistle at Night. So this is an indigenous focused anthology, and I did technically kind of mention it in my announcement video. I didn't vocally mention it. I had a picture blip up, so I just wanted to reiterate it in case people didn't catch it. But one that also works is Peach Pit, and this is 16 stories of unsavory women. And it has some really great authors in this collection. There's a really fun story in there from Kay Ming Chang and also Allison Rumfoot. And the final prompt we are going to talk about is the very last one on the board, and that is Creepy Crawlies. So for this one, honestly, I feel like the hard mode is easier than the easy mode, because I feel like when there's a bunch of critters on the cover, you kind of assume that they're in the book and that the book's about them. So I actually feel like easy mode on this one is a little bit harder. But for easy mode, I do have a couple, and that is The Troop by Nick Cutter. I did already mention this one, but this one does have a lot of bug stuff going on and like animal things in general. So I would count that. Another one that was recently brought to my attention that I am very much interested in. It's called The Skittering by David Haynes. So this is about a small town that faces giant killer bugs. Then I have quite a few for hard mode. So the first one is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily Danforth. So this is actually more of a gothic horror, and it is described as a Hollywood satire about a cursed New England boarding school and the horror film being made about it. This does also have multiple timelines that I can confirm. It has multiple timelines. I don't know if it's multiple POV or not, but it could potentially work for hard mode multiple POV if that's included. Next one, we have The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. This, I didn't realize, has little bees on the cover, so it counts for that. I'm not going to talk about the synopsis because I personally don't know it, because I'm using it for my cover pick. And then moving on, we have Shockwaves by Matt Kurtz. It says 17-year-old Danny thinks his life is over when his girlfriend tells him she's pregnant, but while working the night shift at a museum park, a huge explosion knocks out the power and traps them in separate rides. Then the real terror begins. Then after that, I have Clowns vs. Spiders by Jeff Strand. In this book, we follow a group of clowns that just want to be fun, goofy, entertaining party clowns, but they are forced to take jobs as scary clowns in a haunted attraction. And on opening night, millions of oversized spiders emerge from a cave and invade. And the very last one is Cicada by Tanya Pell. This is another released in 2024, and it is about Ash, who attends a film festival while watching a movie about a killer cicada when she quickly realizes she may be starring in the sequel. Honestly, I feel like I got through those pretty fast, so that is 124 additional books you can consider for horror bingo. Please continue to tag me and everything. I will continue to post people's TBRs on the Instagram highlight and add people's videos to the horror bingo playlist here on YouTube. So continue tagging me in all of those so I don't miss them and I can add them. Make sure you check out all the videos that are already in that playlist to get even more additional ideas and to just see what else everybody is planning to read for it. I love just TBRs in general. That is one of my favorite forms of content, is to just see what books people want to read. If you made it to this point but you have nothing else to say but want to let me know that you were here, go ahead and leave me a ghost emoji in the comments down below. If you haven't yet, please give the video a like, subscribe for future content, turn on the bell notification, all the fun YouTube things that help your girl out, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye!